Morning, thank you. Mr. Altman, perhaps before I hand over to you, if I could just apologise for the late start this morning, and to you, Mr. Pasquale, am I pronouncing that right?
Pasquale.
That's Pasquale. We had a problem with transport this morning on behalf of the inquiry, so I'm very sorry for the delay that you experienced as a result of that. Thank you very much. If I can hand to you, Mr. Altman.
I swear by Almighty God.
I swear by Almighty God.
That the evidence I shall give.
That the evidence I shall give.
Shall be the truth.
Shall be the truth.
The whole truth.
The whole truth.
And nothing but the truth.
And nothing but the truth.
Thank you.
Well, first of all, please, Mr. Pasquale, give us your full name.
Jan Pasquale.
Is that your proper name, or is it Ioannis?
Ioannis Pasquale.
Ioannis, but people call you Jan.
Everyone calls me Jan.
Jan, all right. Now, in front of you are two files. I'm going to ask you to put those to one side, and maybe the usher can help. Usher? Hello?
I'll just put them on the floor.
All right, you do that. Because any documents I show you, we can put up on screen. Do you have your statements in front of you?
Yes, I do.
All right. First of all, let me ask you something about your history. I want to remember that the two statements you've made, Chair, I'll ask for them to be adduced. IPA 000001 and 000002.
Indeed, thank you.
Let me ask you something about your history, please, Mr. Pasquale. You started working at Brookhouse for G4S in what year? Do you remember now? In 2016?
I can't remember exactly. Yeah, 2016.
I think the 25th of April 2016 to be precise. But before that, you'd worked in the prison service.
That's correct.
And tell us about that. When did you started working for the prison service?
2009, I believe.
Whereabouts?
Wandsworth.
Always at Wandsworth?
No, I was detached to other places, but my main place of work was Wandsworth.
Okay. Presumably you had gone through training in order to work as a prison officer?
Yes, I did.
And was it the kind of training you had to do in order to become a detention centre officer with G4S at Brookhouse, or was it different?
It was similar, but it wasn't the same. It was different.
Better quality or less quality?
Which one?
Well, either. Which was better, the one in prison or
The prison service training was of better quality.
Because?
More detail, more time. I just remember it being more detailed. I mean, it was a very long time ago.
Yeah.
But I would say that the prison service training was of better quality.
Yeah. So when you think about the training that you had at G4S, and we may come to aspects of it in a little while, was it all familiar to you?
Yes, I would say so.
Yeah. Now, you tell us that you started working with the prison service in 2009. When did you stop working for the prison service as a prison officer?
I can't actually remember, and I don't have those dates to hand. 2015, 16, around that time. I don't know exactly when. I'm not sure if I've got that written down. I don't know if you have.
Well, let's have a look at some minutes of a meeting that you had, which may help us. Have a look, please, and I'm going to put these up on screen, Mr. Pasquale. It'll be much easier for you than manipulating a heavy bundle, but Chair, for you it's tab 12.
Mm-hmm.
HOM 006091, please. and you'll see something come up on your screen in a moment. Yeah, thank you. If we see the top, if we just scroll upwards, we'll see this is headed Home Office Minutes. And this was a meeting, a discipline hearing with you on the 21st of September at Luna House. And do you remember this meeting, Mr. Bashali?
I remember that the meeting took place, yes.
Yeah. And it was with Jill Smith, who was a decision manager and others. And you'll see a few questions down in the left-hand margin, JS being Ms. Smith. I have a few questions regarding your employment history. On your application form, and of course she's talking about your application form for G4S. On your application form dated the 23rd of August 2016, you gave some dates, and I'd just like to confirm them. When did you start at the prison service? Just tell me the month, if you don't know the exact date. And somebody, it looks as if, although one can't be certain, has typed in something else in red type on this minute. When did you start? Just tell me the month, if you don't know the exact date. I received a final written warning for leaving a Class 3 suite door open, and you were asked what that meant. A toilet door. You say the investigation went on for 2 and a bit years. When did it start? Around Christmas time, so December 2015. They hadn't contacted me in over a year, so I resigned. And then you say you resigned a couple of times. In fact, you thought 4 times. And then over the page, at the top, they asked me to come back. I had no contact from them for a year, so I wrote a letter, which wasn't very nice, basically saying you haven't contacted me and you wouldn't know if I was dead or alive. They convinced me to come back and made promises saying I could work wherever I wanted, but I said no and resigned again in February or March 2017. And you were asked whether you were suspended at that time. You said yes. And if we go down a few more entries where Miss Smith says, I have an Excel extract of your application form. Can you see that?
Sorry, where are we looking?
A little further down, yes, scroll up just a bit more, that's it. I have an Excel extract of your application form. It states you stopped working for them on the 1st of April 2016, but they were still paying you in 2017. Now, I'm sure I don't want to go through all of this detail, but if we go to the top of the next page, page 3. In fact, forgive me, let's just start at the bottom of page 2. And you'll see at the bottom, she asks, do you recall our conversation on the 25th of August when I suspended you? And you said you were shocked about the allegations, so this relates to allegations that were made against you. And I asked you if there had been any previous investigations into you, and you said no. You asked me if there had been investigations for violence. I asked you generally if you had been under investigation, and you said no. I told you there was nothing on my file, this is you, for violence in line with what was on the Panorama programme. And at the top of the next page, that's the introduction.
Can I just say something, please?
Yeah.
The conversation that, is it JS, is
Yeah.
referring to that we had before this conversation.
Yeah.
She asked me if I had been investigated for anything of the nature of that was on the programme.
Right.
And I said no.
Okay. Let's just look how the conversation developed. At the top of page 3, I asked you about investigations generally, and you didn't disclose the investigation at the prison service. So we hear what you say, Mr. Pashali, but what she is saying is I asked about investigations generally, not in particular. And you say it was difficult for me. I know you won't believe me, but someone very high up in the prison service told me it wouldn't affect me. And then she put to you, you were not honest with me. And you say, I know, but I was told not to worry, and they said not to speak about it. So you seemed there to be accepting that you hadn't been, she used the word honest, you said I know, but what she seems to be suggesting there is you weren't entirely
Is that I was-
straight with her.
Right. Well, yeah, but that's wrong.
It's wrong,
Because
is it?
It is wrong because I had assurances from governors that was dealt with, and that was why I still resigned, and I didn't want to go back because I had enough of that situation. I didn't want to go back there, and I had assurances that they would write me a reference, that it would not affect future employment prospects for me, and go down as a negative. If
Yeah,
you
but
like.
there's a difference, Mr. Bashali, I suppose.
And I was told that I didn't need to talk about it.
Well, that's what you tell us, but I imagine you'll accept that there's a difference between assurances from a governor or governors and answering a question with a straight answer.
I did give her a straight answer. I was confident that that matter was dealt with and that I didn't need to talk about it again.
Right. Let's have a look at the outcome. If we go, please, Chair, for you, tab 13. For us, HOM 006092 at page, well, let's look at the first page to see what it is.
It's a shame that you didn't pre-warn me about this particular question because I could have brought the letter in that apologised to me for what had happened to me at that time.
Right.
Yeah.
Can we put up the document, please? This is a letter to you dated the 25th of September from UK Visas and Immigration. The subject is heading hearing outcome, and it tells us that they wrote to you on the 13th of September of 2017 explaining a hearing was necessary to examine whether or not you were suitable for employment by the Home Office and whether or not your continued employment posed a reputational risk of the department. And at the foot of the page, in reaching the decision, the author of the letter considered the footage, and the author is Jill Smith, the footage from Panorama, in particular events to which we'll come later, the 25th of April. You go to the next page, please. And we'll see a little before halfway down, in terms of trust and confidence, I considered the following: your lack of candour about your previous employment history. When you applied for an AIO post on the 23rd of August 2016, you stated that you were employed by the prison service from the 1st of May 2009 to the 1st of April 2016 and started employment with G4S on the 1st of April 2016. This contradicts the evidence provided by HMP Wandsworth, which stated that you were contracted to work there from the 4th of May 2009 to the 21st of March 2017. During the hearing on the 21st of September, you told me that you had been paid by them until March 2017 and were unable to give a credible explanation for the discrepancy. Your failure...
I did give an explanation. Why would you... That blatantly says to you guys that I didn't give an explanation.
Well, this is not to us. This was a letter to you, Mr. Pashani.
Yeah, okay.
And the second bullet point says, your failure to disclose material facts about your previous disciplinary history to me. When I suspended you on the 25th of August, I asked if you had ever been subject to investigation, complaint, or disciplinary action in your previous employment in the prison service or G4S. You said that you hadn't, although at the hearing on the 21st of September, you told me that you had been suspended from the prison service in 2015 for over 2 years and subject to investigation. You didn't provide a credible explanation for this omission.
Yes, I did.
Right. In terms of trust and confidence, Mr. Pashali, should the inquiry have trust and confidence in
Listen, I
evidence.
don't believe for a second that any of you are going to trust me or believe me
No.
with what I say today,
Right.
because you've all made up your minds already. It's quite clear to me. I've given you a statement. My statement is quite detailed about what happened. So I don't think you trust me already. So what do you expect me to say to that?
So-
There are things here that aren't there that should be. But, so for example, 2 years. Sorry, can you hear me when I move away? 2 years. The investigation didn't go on for 2 years, but the whole situation went on for 2 years, if you know what I mean. I had resigned well before then, and they contacted me again, and they brought me back. And I did go in physically, in person, to say, I don't want to come back. I'm done. How many times am I... You're my employer, and I'm your employee. How many times am I supposed to write you a letter saying I've resigned? So that was it. I was done. I walked away from it.
The point is a different one here, Mr. Pashali. The point that Miss Smith is making in this letter to you is that you were not truthful with her.
Well, I feel I was truthful with her.
Right. So that will be the difference between us. So my question to you is, are you asking this inquiry to have faith in your honesty, in the evidence that you're going to give us today?
I will be truthful with you.
Right.
I will tell the truth. I don't care if you believe me or not, okay? It's as simple as that. I just want to get on with my life and put all of this behind me. Now, I've done a statement and I've attended today. Whether you believe me or not, there's nothing I can do about that. Do I want you to believe me? Of course I do. But I can't do nothing about it, can I? So I don't understand your question. You're asking me, do I want you to believe me? Well, of course I do. But what can I do about it? I don't think you do before we've even started.
So your position, Mr. Pashali, is that you think the inquiry has already made up its mind about you?
About the events that you've witnessed on the programme
Right.
and the treatment of detainees,
Yeah.
and that basically a few bad apples working at G4S is the reason why all this has happened. And I'm sure we'll come to all of that later on.
Yeah. Well, we will. Well, we'll bear in mind your answers. As you know, we're going to be here a substantial part of today. But we'll bear in mind those answers as we go through the course of your evidence.
And maybe I can say, Mr. Pashali, that I approach all the evidence that I'm hearing in this hearing room with a neutral mind, and I am very keen to hear your account of what happened. So
Okay.
it's important to me to hear that.
You will hear my account. Thank you.
The actual period of time that you worked at Brookhouse was from the 25th of April till the 10th of June. And of course, the 10th of June of 2017 was before the programme aired on the 4th of September of that year. What made you leave on the 10th of June?
I resigned because I wasn't happy about being at G4S. I thought it'd be different to the prison service.
Sorry, I didn't hear what you just said. Say that again.
I thought it would be different to the prison service or my experiences of my later years in the prison service.
Yeah.
And basically it wasn't. It was just the same.
Oh, well, you better tell us what that means.
Well, what that means is that it was a violent, horrible place to be. It was a horrible place to work and a horrible place to live.
When you say in your witness statement, the first one, we don't need to turn it up, but it's your paragraph 4. I left G4S because I found a better job. I left because I couldn't handle the stress of working there. It has affected my mental health.
It did, yes,
Right.
and it has.
What was the better job you found?
We're working at the Home Office.
Right. So that was the job you were talking about there. It was a different job. Is that what you
I
were
believe
talking-
so. I can't remember.
Right.
Yeah, I believe so.
But if that was one reason, the other reason you say was the stress and mental health reasons. What was the particular stress you found working at Brookhouse?
The particular stress.
Yeah, what was the stress of it? Explain it to
Well,
us.
the everyday stresses
Well,
of
explain.
dealing with people who are committing acts of self-harm, who are being rude to each other, who are being rude to you. The no breaks, working 13, 14-hour shifts with no proper staffing levels. I mean, these are things that you already know. So all of that put together, I couldn't handle it no more.
Yeah.
And
And-
it affected my family life.
Are you saying it was the same experience at Wandsworth, or a different experience?
It was similar, but it wasn't the same because obviously I didn't know when I went to Brookhouse, but it was different because the detainees there, when you go to prison, you get a 4-year sentence, 5-year sentence, 6-year sentence. People know what they've got to do, and they know when they're coming out. With the detainees or detained persons at Brookhouse, it wasn't the case. There were guys that were there. They were there indefinitely. So mental health was an issue. Violence was an issue. Stress was an issue. Being understaffed was an issue.
So all of these things factored into your deciding to
It was time to
go
move
on
on.
the 10th of June.
It was time to move on, yes. And I did that way before the programme came out. I did that way before any of this stuff went down. I took that decision.
Yeah.
And because nobody listened to me either when I raised concerns, when I was working there.
Who did you raise concerns with?
Absolutely anyone that would listen to me. Managers, directors.
Well, I want you to name them.
I'm not going to name people.
Why not?
It's not for me to sit here and name people.
Well,
because
it
I'm
is.
done. I left there 5 years ago.
No, I know. But I'm going to ask you, Mr. Pashali, to tell us, because if you raised concerns and they weren't listened to, then the inquiry deserves to know who those people were, and those people deserve to know because they will be asked about it. So I am asking you to name names, please.
All of them.
But that
Every
doesn't help,
single.
does it?
Well, there's only about 5 directors that I ever met.
All right, well, tell us. Who were they?
I raised concerns with all of them. I'm
All
not
right,
going to
again.
sit here and start telling you names. No, it's not happening.
Mr. Pashali, we're going round in circles.
We are.
because-
I'm not going to give you names.
Mr. Pashali, we're going round in circles because you want this inquiry to accept what you say,
Yes.
and you heard what the chair just said to you, that she comes to this with an open mind. You're not going to help overmuch, are you, if you're not prepared to add flesh to the bone of what you've just told us? So I am going to ask you, please, just to tell us who you mean. Who did you raise concerns with?
I'm not sure if the first name's correct, but Brown is the second name. A female.
Michelle.
A female, yes.
Right? Who else?
Second name, I can't remember the second name. I think first name was Jules.
Jules Williams.
Yes. I can't remember his name, but I think he was the equivalent of the number 1 governor. The guy in charge, I can't remember his name.
Saunders.
He was in charge of
Ben?
G4S. Ben.
Yeah. So those are 3 names.
Those are
Anybody
3
else?
names.
you
Well, they
can
were the
remember?
directors and the manager. At that level, they're the people that
So senior management team.
I used to
level.
see.
Right. Now, you were there, if I've got it right, for a period of just over a year, between
About that.
April 16 and June 17, so let's say 14 months,
Yeah.
nearest damn it. So that we understand the concerns you raised, Mr. Pashali, was it during the whole period or towards the end of the period that you raised concerns?
I'd say after being there for 3 or 4 months, maybe,
Right.
I raised particular concerns.
And you raised your concerns verbally or in writing?
No, it was verbally. I didn't do it in writing.
And what were the nature of the concerns? What,
The concerns were pretty much one major concern. There's no point moaning about not getting a tea break or a lunch break, because there wasn't. If there's no staff to cover that, I'm not silly. I understand if they can't cover it, it ain't happening. But my main concern and gripe was that the same people were being used for use of force all the time.
right. So that was the core concern that you raised with them?
That was the core concern.
Right. No other concerns or peripheral
I can't
concerns?
remember, but I remember that one being a real issue for me.
Now, to be fair to you, you're not the only person to say that, and we will hear that from at least one other witness. But help us to understand what that complaint really meant. What was the point you were making?
The point that I was making is that every time I come in on shift, on duty, I can't think of a figure for the staffing levels, but let's just assume there was 30 or 40 members of staff on duty in the establishment at any given day. Why are the same 3-4 names always being pulled to go and put kit on, to be doing use of forces, planned interventions? And when I say not just 1, not just 2, you could be doing 3 or 4 a day.
Yeah.
And then you come in the next day, and it's your name in the frame yet again. And I thought this was unfair. Everyone is trained in the use of force. in CNR, control and restraint. Why did 80% of the working population of Brookhouse get away with not doing any use of forces at all?
Yeah. Well, if you wanted to be devil's advocate, somebody might say...
I know what you're going to say.
An answer to that is...
That we loved it, that we thought it was great, and all this stuff.
that
It's
some
absolute
people
nonsense.
enjoyed it over others.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I hated it. Why did I leave? I hated it.
And what was it you hated?
Why would I enjoy putting my hands on somebody else and having to control them and restrain them? It's not fun.
No.
But,
So-
you think that I think it's fun. Your comments yesterday to Chris Donnelly.
Wait a
Oh,
sec,
does he
Mr.
do
Bishop.
MMA and boxing? Where did all this come from? That I'm some kind of cage fighter now?
Well, it comes from a transcript, actually, Mr. Pashali, which we'll look at a little later.
Okay.
All right, so nobody's making this up, Mr. Pashali. This is evidence that the inquiry has. All
Okay.
right. But I'm not suggesting anything at the moment. I'm just asking
All right.
for your evidence.
I didn't enjoy doing
Right.
restraints. We were used all the time. And the reason we were used all the time is because other staff simply did not want to do it. They simply did not want to do it.
Yeah. So the same names, that would include you, Derek Murphy.
Yep.
Who else? Who else was involved most of the time, all of the time?
Basically, the staff that worked on Ewing. I can't remember. I can't remember people's names. It was 5 years ago.
And was E-Wing a wing that you worked on?
Yes,
Much of the time, all of the time?
I'd say most of the time.
Yeah,
Even though I didn't want to be there most of the time.
yeah.
I'd come in and I'd look at the rota or the roster or the detail, and it would clearly say like I'm on A wing or B wing. Yet I'd find I've been moved to E wing. These are the kind of issues, these are the kind of issues that concerns that I've raised.
I just want to ask you something about the training you had at G4S, please. Chair for you, tab 4, CPS 000007. If we go to the page 4, in fact, let's start at, sorry, because this is one document, Mr. Bashali, but it's jumbled up. But if we can just go back to the page before, please, we'll find this is a certificate. That you had some refresher training at Brookhouse on the 5th of April of 2017. Your basic CNR training was, as we can see, over a few days in May of 2016. John Connolly was your tutor. And we see that your refresher training was on the 5th of April. And then if we turn again, please, to page 4, at the bottom, got your name at the top. This is your annual refresher training, which relates to the 5th of April. And scroll down, please, to the bottom. We'll see again the instructor that you had was John Connolly. First of all, tell us something about John Connolly. What was your view of him as a trainer?
He was a very good trainer.
In what way?
I believe he'd been training at Brookhouse for a number of years.
Yeah.
He was good. He covered everything that needed to be taught in the lessons. He demonstrated the techniques well. And I don't really have a negative memory or a memory of him not being a good trainer. He could have easily been a trainer for the prison service. He was of that. The standard was that good.
Had you worked with him on use of force interventions?
Not directly. He may have been there in an advisory position, sometimes on planned interventions. If he was on duty, he would come in the background, just to make sure. And if someone wasn't doing something particularly correct, he'd, for example, nudge them on the shoulder or tap them and say, no, just slow down, do this, do that. But not, I can't even remember an incident where I was involved with him, no. I'm not saying that it didn't happen, but I can't remember.
You clearly watched Panorama.
I did watch Panorama.
You watched it more than once or just the once?
I've watched it twice. I watched the Panorama programme I watched once.
Yeah. You may remember a time when John Connolly and others is on a stairwell before an intervention on a detainee, D275, who's on the netting protesting on the 17th of May. And you may remember that he used a racist term. Do you remember that?
I do remember that, yes.
Was that your experience of John Connolly?
No, it was not. I would like to say something about that, but I'm trying to find the right word to describe how I felt when I heard it. It's sort of like shocked, but not shocked. But don't take that to mean as because I've heard him say those words before. It's not that. He had never been racist around me. Now, obviously, I'm not English. You can see from the way I look. And I've said this in my statement. Maybe that's why people weren't racist around me, because they would think that I would take offence to that, which obviously I would. But what I want to say to the inquiry is, now I'm not excusing what he said, obviously. It's unacceptable. But when you're about to carry out CNR, a planned intervention, the adrenaline is flowing, you're nervous, you're anxious, you're scared, all these emotions are running through your body. Now, I'm not trying to say that there's an excuse for what he said, but I think he had a moment of weakness, which didn't help by leading questions or silly questions. I mean, no one, let me tell you now, in all my years, no one, before a planned intervention, says to their colleagues in full kit, what are we going to call him? No one says that. Everyone knows what they need to do. And you either refer to the detained person or prisoner by name, or prisoner, or something like that, or prison number. Nobody asks what we're going to call him. So I do feel, unfortunately for John, that question almost kind of pushed him to make that stupid remark. John Connolly is not racist. And I don't know him personally. I don't socialise with him. I don't even have his phone number. We're not friends. But in my experience, John Connolly is not racist.
So your position is, what, Callum Tully set him up for it?
I don't know if Callum Tully set him up for it, but I'm telling you, in all my years as a prison officer, no one asks people those types of questions when their blood's up, they're about to carry out a restraint. Remember, I told you you're scared, your adrenaline's flowing, you're worried, you're anxious, you're nervous. Am I going to perform? You don't want to let your colleagues down. You know, there's a whole bunch of stuff going through your head. You don't want to fail. Everybody wants it to be as fast and as safe as possible and just done. Asking a question like that at that time, it was unfair.
Right.
But I'm not excusing what John Connolly said. I have said that.
Any more, I suspect, than you will excuse John Connolly saying during that exchange that he was going to mash the guy up in the corner or fuck him up.
I don't remember seeing that.
You don't?
Is that what he said? If that's what he said, then that's what he said.
Certainly on the transcript, yeah.
Yeah, but did he put him in the corner and mash him up?
Well,
No, he
what's
didn't.
the point you're making, Mr.
Well, the point is, again, he's just sounding off, possibly. Just sounding off, possibly.
Yeah.
Did anyone throughout the time at G4S that you're looking at actually smash anyone up, put them in a corner, break their bones, break their fingers, all this stuff? No.
Right. So, what, it was just chat?
Is it all right if I swear?
You say what you
Please.
want?
Just shit talk. That's all I can put it down to. Just nonsense, crap. It shouldn't have been said. But in that environment, at that time, it was like that.
Yeah.
But no one did that stuff. And if they did, surely if Callum is recording undercover for all of that period of time, you would have bundles of incidents to look at, would you not? If we were doing that every day of the week.
If you look at it from a different angle, though, John Connolly was the CNR
He was,
trainer.
he was, I agree.
And he's supposed to be setting an
A
example.
good
isn't he?
example, I agree
Yeah.
with you.
It's
And,
not-
I
it's
felt
not a
let
good
down.
example, is
no,
it,
No, it's
Mr.
not. I
Bashar?
agree.
No.
I agree.
No.
But then, what did management and senior management, and the Home Office for that matter, they was members of staff that worked there. I think their offices were upstairs, not that we ever see them, but they would come down occasionally. Everybody knew what the culture was like. No one challenged it. No one did nothing about it. I mean, it sounds stupid, but why not introduce a policy? You're not allowed to swear whilst you're at work. It would make you think about it, at the very least. Everyone used bad language, top to bottom. Detainees, staff, managers, directors, everybody.
Okay. So would you say that Connolly was an influential figure?
I don't know the answer to that question, because for me and the staff on E-Wing, we respected him. But I wouldn't say that he influenced me.
Yeah.
Now, with regards to the younger staff, I don't know.
Yeah. Do you think you were respected,
I believe I was, yes.
especially with your prison history?
Yeah, maybe, because I was more experienced, and as incidents and things developed, I would often have to take the lead, because I just had to, because they couldn't deal
Yeah.
with it.
And did you help others around you with control and restraint and advise them?
When you say help, what do you mean, like take them to the dojo and practice techniques? No, I didn't.
Mr. Bashali, you know I'm not saying that, but,
Well, no, what do you mean?
well, give them
Advise them.
advice from
Yes,
the
I did.
years of
Yeah,
experience
yes,
you've
I gave
had.
them advice.
Yeah,
I gave them advice.
yeah. And so, presumably, although you weren't an official trainer like Mr. Connolly was, you were also someone others might have looked up to.
Yes, I would say so, possibly. Is that my fault?
Is that what?
Is that my fault?
I don't know what you mean.
Well, I can't help it if people look up to me.
Did you have any mental health training when you were at Brookhouse?
I'm going to say no. But there probably was something very small and insignificant, in my opinion, but I'm going to say no. No one at Brookhouse is mental health trained. DCOs, managers, and I've heard some of the evidence that's been given to the inquiry, and I'm telling you now, no one is mental health trained to the level, apart from healthcare, and I believe that doctors that were around, but I didn't see much of them, to be honest.
So, if I ask you a question, I asked Mr. Donnelly yesterday, were you able to differentiate between a detained man who was genuinely ill and a detained man who was not genuinely ill but just disruptive?
Well, I don't think you need a degree to work that one out. How can I determine between someone who, or any of you, determine he's mentally ill, he's just lying or blagging or messing around? How would I determine that?
So the answer is no.
Of course it's no. How would you know that?
So the answer is no, Mr.
Yes,
Chair.
the answer is no.
Yeah. So, insofar as that part of the job is concerned, did you feel equipped to do it?
No, I did not.
No. Did you raise concerns about it?
Yes,
you
I raised concerns, but nothing happened.
Well, what concerns did you raise?
That we weren't trained to deal with the amount of detained persons that we had on constant supervision. Now, there were many more on ACDTs, but my focus was the constant supervision, because it was E-Wing. I mean, you'd come into work sometimes, there'd be 4 or 5 constant supervisions on the go at the same time. We weren't equipped to deal with that. We were trained to restrain people. If someone commits an act of self-harm or shows aggression or violence, you restrain them. That is what we were trained to do.
Who do you remember raising concerns with?
Same names as I said earlier.
And what was the response?
I can't actually remember the actual response, but the feeling that the memory that I have is it would have been along the lines of just get on with the job.
And what was the response when you raised concerns about the same people doing the use of force?
No one else wants to do it. I mean, initially it was, get on with it. And they would even make jokes that, we enjoy doing it. And I don't enjoy doing it at all. I don't mind doing my fair share. I will do my quota. But anyway, I'm getting off the track. Basically, the response was nothing's going to happen about it.
You told us a little earlier that Brookhouse was a horrible place to work. You said that's in your witness statements, and I think you also call it hostile, aggressive and violent. Generally, what was morale like in that place?
Morale was not good. And if anyone sits up here and tells you it was good, they're not telling you the truth.
Well, did you watch Mr. Donnelly's evidence? It rather sounds like he did yesterday.
I did, yes.
And he rather painted a picture of a different Brookhouse to the one that others paint. What do you say about that?
I was a little disappointed.
A little disappointed.
Because I don't know why he took the angle that he did. I mean, listen, he'd been there longer than I had. I was there for a very short period of time. So maybe he'd seen different situations and different environments, but the time that I was there, it was a horrible place to work. And morale was low. Staff sickness was through the roof. People didn't want to turn up to work.
What was it you said went through the roof? Sickness? Staff sickness?
I believe so, yeah. I'm pretty sure there was always someone off sick and stuff like that. And we were low on numbers anyway.
Yeah.
Our numbers were low anyway.
So, where did you feel that the staffing issues were at their worst? Was it across the whole estate, or was it in certain wings?
It was across the whole estate. It was a long time ago, so I can't remember the details, but if a wing was supposed to have 3 or 4 members of staff, they never had that. They would often run with 2, on occasions with 1, which is ridiculous. Unfortunately, I don't know the staffing levels, but I can't remember what the figures were. I did at the time.
Was this a constant, that the place was understaffed, or was it just periodic?
When you say a constant, I'd say 85, 90% of the time. Like, it wasn't all the time, but it was more often than not.
Yeah. What impact did the understaffing have on others, apart from obviously the stresses of individuals having to, make up the slack? How did that impact on staff retention, turnover?
Sorry, 1 second. I have referred to this in Annex A of my statement. You just wanted me to talk about it, do you? You don't want me to read that out?
It's entirely up to you. What paragraph are you looking at? 7 onwards?
Page 7, Annex A, questions 60 to 65, but I don't know whether your document relates to mine.
Tell us what you want to say, Mr. Bashani.
Right. Sorry, what was the question? From memory.
It's about the impact of staffing. I mean, if
Yeah,
you're looking at paragraph
wasn't,
60 onwards.
It wasn't good, obviously. It
Yeah.
meant that you, again, like I said earlier, you're not getting your breaks. It means that you're working under extra pressure that you shouldn't have been working under. How can we provide a service to detained persons if we haven't got the numbers to do it?
Yeah.
To be honest with you, another issue that I did raise, in my opinion, we shouldn't have even been opening the doors in the morning. But I'm not an expert when it comes to the rules of G4S. But I know from the prison service, if you haven't got the right amount of staff, you don't open doors because it's not safe to do so. And we did.
Do you mean to new arrivals?
Sorry?
Do you mean open doors to new arrivals? Is that what you're talking about, or open cell doors? What are you
No,
talking about?
I mean open cell doors. So
Right.
every morning you unlock detained persons or prisoners for their activities, their association.
Yeah.
The point I'm making is that what I tried to say at the time, if we haven't got the appropriate staffing levels, we shouldn't be opening the doors at all. Because can we deal with incidents, if they arise, if we haven't got the right amount of staff.
And who did you raise that concern with?
The same, everybody.
And what was the reaction?
It's just, this is how we do it here, and you just have to get on with it. I mean, I can't remember if that was the exact line, but something to that effect.
You deal with staffing levels in your first witness statement in paragraph 60. That's what you were looking for.
I think so,
Looking
yeah.
at. You say there were always staff shortages at Brookhouse. Page 7. We don't need to put it up. Low staffing levels were the catalyst for many issues with detainees asking for things or asking to do things that we were not able to facilitate because staffing levels were too low. Staff shortages adds to frustration for both staff and detainees. It was the root of all evil. Have you got it? And then paragraph 61, being short-staffed meant that staff who were working were tired, overworked, stressed and depressed. There wasn't enough time to do the job properly. Staff hated coming into work. In paragraph 62, with not enough staff on the wing, detainees should not have been unlocked as there was not enough staff to manage them. This creates a huge risk for staff and detainees. So that's what you're telling us.
Sorry, yes. Yeah.
That was the point.
Yeah.
Right. Now, a different topic. What were staff attitudes towards the detained men in your experience? How did your colleagues act towards the detained men? What were their attitudes?
Their attitudes, from what I can remember, and for myself, obviously a lot of the detainees were well behaved. There was no issues with them, and we would be sort of like friends, if you know what I mean. Not just me, but with all of the staff. Everyone would try and do what they could to help. I would often sit down and play chess with detainees, but because of the detainees who were violent, who were aggressive, who were abusive, it did create a feeling of disdain towards those detainees. And I think it's because the detainees' behaviour was never challenged. They could... I was going to say they could do what they want. To a degree, they could do what they want to members of staff, and nothing would happen. So, attitudes of staff, and myself included, towards detainees who were abusive towards us, who were rude, who, for example, if I opened the door in the morning and I got a swear word from a detainee, then yeah, I would have given him a swear word back. That's what I'm trying to explain, if you understand what I mean. Yeah, so when it comes to attitudes, staff didn't hate detainees, but because of the reasons that I've said, behaviour not being challenged, not being tackled, it led to the stuff that you see on Panorama.
Did you see a difference in the attitudes of staff to detainees at Brookhouse and the attitudes of prison officers when you were a prison officer towards prisoners?
So do you mean the difference between the two groups?
Yeah. In other words, was your and your colleagues' attitudes as prison officers, say at Wandsworth, to prisoners or those on remand or convicted prisoners, different to the attitudes that you experienced at Brookhouse during the G4S years or year that you were there?
It was different, and that doesn't mean that there wasn't no violence or aggression inside in the prison service, and there is to this day, as you all know, I'm sure. But within the prison service, there are rules, and everyone knows where they stand. And if the rules are broken, there are consequences to those rules. For example, if I opened the door in the morning and the prisoner told me swore at me, if I felt at the time that he's had a bad day or he's had a bad time or he's had some bad news, I would have allowed it. But if I thought it was just being rude and abusive for no good reason, I would nick him. He would have to go down for an adjudication, and he would be punished in some way for his behaviour. Loss of canteen, loss of something. There was none of that. at G4S. So in the prison service, it is different. I'm not saying that it's all brilliant there, but it is different. When there is no consequences to anyone's actions, that's the kind of environment that you allow to breed and create.
And you will have been accustomed in the prison environment to privileges.
Who, me?
Yeah, to enhanced privileges, basic privileges for prisoners.
Right, correct.
At Wandsworth, we know that didn't exist.
Yes,
In
it
a
is.
place
At
like-
Wandsworth? Is
No,
it?
Brookhouse.
Oh, sorry, yes, yes.
From your perspective, do you think that encouragement for good behaviour would be something that should be looked at?
Well, yeah, obviously. But the guys getting paid the big bucks don't seem to think that, do they?
I can't hear you.
Yes, I do think that, obviously, but the guys getting paid the big bucks don't seem to think that, do they?
Who are the guys?
Well,
getting
whoever's
paid
at the top,
big
I
bucks?
don't know. I don't know, but whoever makes that decision doesn't think it's important here.
Right. So you think that would be a good idea? That's what you're telling
Well,
us.
there has to be, you have to have incentives, do you not?
Yeah. The inquiry has received 2 reports from an expert by the name of Mary Bosworth, a professor.
I haven't seen that report.
You haven't?
No,
Well, let me tell you what she says. I'm surprised because it is
It
in
wasn't sent
an
to me.
evidence proposal, and it should be in that one of those files.
it wasn't sent to me.
Be that as it may, I just want to ask you about her view about something. We can put it up on screen so you can see what she has to say. Chair, it's behind your divider 28, so you'll probably find it in your second volume. I'll put it up on screen, Mr. Bashali, so you can see it as well. And it's at page 35. It's INQ 000064 at page 35. I just want to ask about some of the terminology that you used, and we can actually look at an example in a moment if needs be, but she deals with this. Page 35. Because one of the many things that she was asked to look at included language and the type of culture that was at Brookhouse at the time. And if we go to the bottom, do you see under the heading gender, 7.6, male officers sometimes speak dismissively of their female colleagues. Some are paternalistic and do not think women should be working in Brookhouse. And she quotes something that you said.
Yeah, I can see that.
There is no way I'd let my sister, mother, Mrs. or any other female I care about work here.
Correct.
And she goes on to deal over the page, please, at 7.10. On E-Wing, DCO Jan Pashali refers to a conversation he was having with a detained man in the following terms. Quote, he said, "My heart is hurting, I miss my mummy and my daddy," and I said, "Mate, fucking grow up, be a man," end quote. And that's a reference.
Sorry, where's that come from?
It's 7.10.
No, I can see it on the screen. I mean, where has this come from?
You,
Like, where did it come from?
it's a transcript that we have.
I'm not disputing that I
No,
said
but
it.
you asked to see it, and I'm going to
Yeah,
show
I
it to you.
wanted to know if there was possibly more context to the conversation.
Right, we'll have a look. Tab 40, Chair. Take this document down if you would. And we go to, it's the 9th of May 2017. It's TRN 0000077 at page 40.
This document has not been made available to me.
all of these documents should have been made available to you, Mr. Pashali, but
It's in my statement.
we'll have a look. It's the 9th of May 2017. It's V20170509 00018. So that's the reference which shows us it's the 9th of May. And the actual part that's quoted, you'll see just about halfway down where you'll see your name, Jan Pashali, mate. This is the honest truth. Have you got that?
Yeah.
He said, my heart is hurting, I miss my mummy and my daddy, and I was just like, mate, fucking grow up, will you? You're a man. And if you want to look further up the page to see what the context is, you're talking with Callum Tully about somebody ciphered as D87. Another male officer given the number 1 that was having a bit of, and Tully says, and the black guy in room 3, if you don't do anything for him straight away in terms of cell, and you say it's like he's infatuated with me, yeah? You say you just want to fucking, male officer 1 says, I know, you say I can't handle, and the
Right.
other...
Is this on Ewing? Is this on Ewing? Do you know?
I can't tell you.
Right. I think I may know what.
Right, let's just
Detainees.
carry on. You've seen that when you said, give it a rest, mate, like that, didn't you? He sat out there, the old bottom lip. You say, when I walked out, he was fucking serious. Remember Burn? So I said, we'll have a game of chess. It was a newbie. And the other officer says, yeah, he was, wasn't he? Because I was sitting, I was down the other end. I said to him, you all right? He went, and you say, fucking hell. Something inaudible said by the other male officer, and you say, mate, this is the honest truth. He said, my heart's hurting, I miss my mummy and daddy, and I was just like, mate, fucking grow up, will you? You're a man. And the other officer says, he's been so institutionalised down here, ain't he? What's he been down here now, 2 to 3 months? The point that Professor Bosworth is making is that, you know, comments like that suggest part of the culture is paternalistic. The earlier quotation from you that we saw about there's no way that you would allow, in effect, a female, your sister, mother, or your missus work there. And here we have something quoted from you in the context, insofar as you can discern it, that we have just read together.
Can I make a comment on this? Because I recall this now.
If you want, yeah.
So you say it's in context, but it's not in context, because what that doesn't show. I've remembered the detainee, the detained person that we're talking about, and he was extremely needy. And I used to allocate a lot of my time to him every day on Ewing, and I'd play chess with him. And I'm sure many members of staff see me playing chess with him. In my mind, that line there is nothing more than how a friend would turn to you, which I think I did at the time as well, and said, just grow up, just fucking grow up, man, you're a man. Sometimes men need to hear that. Sometimes. It wasn't done in an aggressive fashion. It wasn't done with, you know, with malice. That would have been while sitting down with him quite calmly at the table.
Yeah.
So
No one's suggesting it was done with malice or aggressively. The point that's being made is
Yeah.
it is part of an overall picture of the culture at Brookhouse. It's paternalistic.
No, because it's not. If someone is in genuine need, you wouldn't answer that call with "fucking grow up, man," would you? Ordinarily, or normally, that was me and that particular detainee got on very well, so I would have felt comfortable to say something like that to him.
Yeah. All right.
And with regards to my mother, my sister, and my daughters and so on, yeah, no, of course I wouldn't have them working there. Luckily, my family is something that I am in control of. Why would I want them to work there? I've been there. I know what it's like. Now, if another female, you know, women want to work there, that doesn't mean I have an issue with them working there.
What was your view about women working there?
Yeah, I haven't got a problem with women
No.
working in those
Did
places.
you think it wasn't a place for women?
It wasn't safe, and I mean, one of the best officers that ever trained me, and I'm not going to mention her name, but she was a female, and she was very good, extremely good. But when it comes to the risk of violence and being attacked and all the rest of it, then I can't help but feel, no, I would rather my family members weren't there who were female. And also, it ain't just me, but when we were complaining about CNR, the ladies were never hardly ever chosen for it. Now, they're trained the same as us, so why not?
But they were occasionally, weren't they?
They were occasionally, but it weren't a lot. You know, the percentages would have been way down. And if they were always normally the 4th officer or the 5th officer. I don't recall once of a female officer taking the shield. Well, why not? You're trained the same as us.
And so your point is, what it wasn't a place for women.
Well, no, I wouldn't say that, because you use, even for male officers, you use people's strengths, you know, where it's appropriate. And it's as simple as that. But I'm not going to say that I don't think females should be in the job, because I don't think that at all. They should be in the job. But there are aspects to the job that I think most of the female officers that I've worked with, it puts them in too much risk.
Can I ask you, just to go back to one other thing while I have it in mind, on staffing, and it's in your first witness statement at paragraph 11.
Is that NXA?
Yeah. You find your first witness statement, paragraph 11 on page 2. Just want to ask you about something you said. You were asked about the values of G4S or its culture and how it impacted on the management of staff. And you make the point there, G4S used the same staff repeatedly for CNR, so this leads on from that complaint that you make to us and the one that you clearly made in your witness statements. But you continue. There were not enough staff to cover for breaks, not enough time for report writing. Staff were expected to squeeze report writing in whilst on the wing performing other duties. It was challenging and wrong. There wasn't a proper procedure for handing in report forms which would then go missing, and staff were accused of not completing their paperwork. Is that the truth, Mr. Pashali, that there wasn't enough time for report writing?
No, and I think you know that anyway.
What?
You must know that. I think quite a few members of staff they must have said it to you. They must have put it in their statements.
Sorry. We may be at cross purposes. What are you saying, Mr. Pashali? I'm asking you whether what you
Was
said
there enough time to do paperwork? No, there wasn't.
There wasn't?
No, there wasn't. I'm saying I think you know that. That's what I said. I think you
There's
already...
no point asking me what I know and what I don't know, Mr. Pashali, because it's nothing to do with me, but I'm asking you
Okay. No, there was
whether
not.
what you said there
No.
was
No.
accurate.
Of course it's accurate. The procedure is, if someone carries out a control and restraint or a self-harm incident where hands-on have had to be, where you have to put hands on, or witness to suicide or anything like that, you're supposed to be given at least 45 minutes to leave your place of work, to go and sit down and calm down, have a cup of tea or have a smoke or whatever it needs to be done for you to relax and calm down, and then carry out your paperwork. And you're supposed to have other members of staff to cover your place of work. That never happened, ever.
And that was because of what? Staffing?
Yeah, because there wasn't enough staff. Where do you... I'm just trying to remember. But as I say, it was a long time ago. But where and I understand the manager's problems. If you've only got 2 staff on each wing and you need to let 3 staff go off and do paperwork, where do you get them from? I understand that.
But you're not saying you never completed use of force forms, are you?
No.
No. So,
I mean, I can't remember if there is an occasion where I did or didn't complete a use of force form, but they're always done on your unit,
yeah.
in your office,
Yeah.
whilst you were still dealing with...
Yeah. But so we're clear, Mr. Pashali, you're not saying throughout the whole 14 months that you worked at G4S after a use of force intervention that you were on every occasion unable to complete a use of force report, are you?
I would have put it in. I would have got it in somewhere. Yeah, I would have found the time
Yeah.
to do it.
All right.
But that isn't the procedure. That isn't what's supposed to happen.
No. Well, what was supposed to happen then?
I just explained that, didn't I? About the
Well,
45
you were
minutes.
supposed to be given 45 minutes clear time to sit down, immediately after?
As soon as the incident is resolved
Yeah.
and you are relieved from being part of that incident, you are supposed to be allowed to go away from
Yeah.
everybody. I mean, in the prison service, there was a designated area, like a quiet area, where you would go. There's none of that at G4S.
Yeah.
And you would sit there, and then after you've calmed down, when I say calm down, when you've just been involved in a restraint, and again the adrenaline is flowing, you'd be hard pushed to write the use of force. So the idea is just to calm yourself, recollect your thoughts, and then carry out your paperwork. And I'm saying to you that that never happened.
Right. And where was this written down? Help us. Where do you remember this rule being found? Whose rule was it? Company rule? Home office rule?
I don't know the G4S company rules off by heart. I never did. But I know that it's a PSO. I know it stems from the prison service, that rule exists.
Right.
I don't know where it's written down. I wouldn't know where to look.
If it's a prison service
no,
order...
but a lot of the rules were used in G4S that were prison rules, PSOs and so on.
Yeah. But I'm not challenging you on this. I'm just interested to know where this rule is to be found.
I can't remember. If you would like, I can come back to the inquiry
Well,
with
I'm sure
that.
we can find it as well. But if you can remember, do
I
tell us.
don't remember.
All right.
It was 5 years ago.
Chair, I think we've been going just a little over an hour. I think you may have some questions at this juncture before we continue, and it might be a good time to have a break. But perhaps you might want to ask those questions first of all.
Thank you, Mr. Waltman. Just two very brief questions, if I may, Mr. Pashali. So, one of the things that you said early on in your evidence was around that you often, when you arrived at Brookhouse, even if you thought you were going to be allocated to A wing or B wing, you would find out when you turned up for your shift that you were actually going to be on E wing. Can you just explain a little bit about why you think that was? What was your understanding of why you were always put onto E wing?
No one wanted to work on E-wing. So it fell to the few regulars that did work on E-wing.
Is your impression that it was because you had a particular experience did they put more experienced officers there, or was it as simple as people didn't want to work there?
Probably a bit of both. From a manager's point of view, it would have been easy to put the staff, us, me, the other guys there, because he knew that or they would know that it would get taken care of. But I also feel it's 50-50. 50% of it is that the other staff in the detention centre did not want to work on E-wing. They did not want to work on E-wing. Even though I'm sure now that after all of this, everyone will be like, no, that's not the case. Well, why didn't you step up then? And if anyone's watching this, why didn't you step up then? Come down to E-wing, why didn't you?
Okay, thank you. You've obviously talked a little bit about your experience in the prison service and some of the differences that you observed. Could you just tell us something, just some in general terms? In your experience, was there how much of a difference was there in staffing levels? If you think about the ratios of staff to detained person or prisoners, can you just explain to somebody who's never been in any of those settings, perhaps what some of those differences look like?
The staffing levels at 1A weren't great either, but you need to appreciate that Wandsworth is, I don't know if it still is, it was the biggest prison in Europe. So on any given day, although they were short, we had more numbers within the establishment. Brookhouse was a small centre. I believed it housed somewhere in the region of 500, maybe 600 detained persons at the time, I can't remember. So there just wasn't the pool of staff to go to. So it weren't necessarily that the prison service was flush with staff, but there was just more staff because of the nature of the establishment. They were bigger, much bigger. And I would say that we did have more staff. I can't remember numbers, but I don't remember moaning about not getting a break, missing breaks and stuff like that at the prison service. Mm-hmm. So that tells me that the staff were there to cover breaks and so on. But unfortunately, I can't remember the exact figures.
Okay, thank you. And then just one final question, and then we will. You can have a cup of tea and a break. Mr. Waltman will no doubt ask you some more detailed questions about what happens in the aftermath of a use of force. And you've talked about your experience in the prison service, where you have a set amount of time that you should be able to calm down, fill in the paperwork. In your experience, both in the prison service and at your time at Brookhouse, does any of that process also involve a debrief of sorts in talking about how the use of force went?
We never had debriefs at G4S.
Did you in the prison service?
I'm trying to think. Yeah, we did. Not all the time, but if there was an issue, if it weren't a straightforward incident, then we would have a debrief. We would also be able to go to certain members of staff for advice and share information about the incident. They were like designated roles that you could go to them if you wanted help. There was none of that at G4S. Nothing.
Thank you, Mr. Bashali. They're all my questions for now. Thank you.
No, Chair, well, it's 10 to 12. Can I suggest we come back at around 5 past?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bashali.
Otherwise.
Mrs. Bashali, let me ask you something about the drugs problem at Brookhouse. And you say a few things about this in your witness statement of paragraph 38, your first witness statement, page 5. Again, there's no need to put it up on screen. You were asked about what the process for preventing drugs entering Brookhouse was, and you said staff would be searched on arrival. I was searched. I had no problem with this. I can't comment on whether the processes were successful, as I had nothing to do with it. You'd need to speak to senior management or staff who were tasked to deal with it. Clearly unsuccessful.
Sorry?
It was clearly unsuccessful, whatever G4S were doing to prevent drugs
Yes.
coming in.
I agree.
Do you have any insight into how drugs were brought into Brookhouse while you were there?
I don't know this for a fact, but just from my experience, from common sense really, it has to be people that are coming into the centre, doesn't it? So staff, healthcare,
Yeah.
solicitors, anyone coming into the centre. Another point of entry for drugs would be on visits, because again, people from outside are coming in.
Yeah.
And another point would be from things that were sent in.
Did you have or hear any rumours about any particular members of staff who might have been bringing drugs into the centre?
And all the time that I worked there, it wasn't even a topic of conversation. I mean, obviously, we knew that we had a drugs problem, but no one's name was bandied about or anything like that.
Clearly you knew that there was a problem because you...
Well, everyone knew.
Well, I'm going to ask you, DCOs and DCMs clearly knew. What about management? Did they know? Was it clear to them that there was a drugs problem?
It would be impossible for them not to know because of the amount of spice attacks, you know, when detainees or detained persons are suffering the effects of drugs.
Yeah. So it was all pretty open, it wasn't concealed, and anybody in that centre, including...
What do you mean by concealed? The fact
Well,
that everyone just knew?
It wasn't hidden, everybody knew.
Everyone knew that we had a problem,
Yeah.
yes.
And that would include senior management,
For sure.
Home Office staff,
Yes.
IMB who came round occasionally.
Anyone that walked the landings of that place would know.
Yeah.
It's impossible not to know.
Okay. And what was done about it?
To my recollection, nothing. There wasn't a dedicated team to dealing with it. There wasn't a department dedicated to dealing with it. Nothing.
Right. So it was just allowed to continue, and you and your colleagues had to deal with this as best you could?
Basically, yes.
Right.
I mean, I'd say that the basics were done. So,
What do you mean by that?
for example, when not a lot, but when they would carry out staff searches. But I think in the whole time that I was there, when I wasn't there that long, I got searched once, maybe twice.
Are you talking about on arrival?
It coming into the centre.
So it wasn't done every day?
No.
And every time you
No.
arrived for work?
I know one and maybe two, but definitely one. And in my opinion, that's not good enough.
And when you were searched, did you feel the search was done properly?
I honestly can't remember. I can't remember, I'm afraid.
I mean, you would have been searched by colleagues, presumably.
Yes, correct.
And was there a possibility that the searches staff underwent was not conducted thoroughly?
I'm not going to say it wasn't a possibility because I don't know. But, and I actually can't remember, but you would assume that a duty manager would be present, you know, relevant people in positions where to make sure these things did happen properly. I can't actually remember if that happened or not.
Were the measures taken, such as they were, to prevent drugs coming into Brookhouse, similar or dissimilar to those you experienced at Wandsworth?
No, different.
In what way?
So when you entered the prison establishment, you would form an orderly queue, all of the staff, and let's say from the length of this room, every 20 feet there'd be a member of staff who is part of the searching team standing there just monitoring staff. So for example, you wouldn't be able to come out the queue, you wouldn't be able to go back outside the establishment, you had to wait and you'd be monitored, and then you would pass through to an area where your bag would go through the machine, the x-ray machine. You would then be given a physical search, not a strip search, but a physical pat-down search. And there would also be dogs present. To my mind, that is a good way of carrying out.
Sniffer dogs?
Yes.
Yeah.
And they could also detect mobile phones.
Yeah. Now, compare that with Brookhouse.
No, I don't remember that. I don't remember any.
Well, anything like it?
Not really. But I can't tell you if there was a manager present or not, because I don't remember. But it was nothing like that.
And so, when you compare your experience of Wandsworth and drugs and your experience of Brookhouse and drugs, is there any comparison? In other words, at Wandsworth, were people openly using spice?
There was still problems
Yeah.
with drugs in the prison service, and you know that. But efforts were made to try and restrict it coming in. I can honestly say during my time at Brookhouse, no real effort was made. Now, whether the prison service is fighting a losing battle on that is a different thing, but efforts were made.
Different topic, Mr. Bashali. I just want to ask you about language and the use of language. If you go, please, to, again, in your first statement, to paragraph 114 on page 14, 114 on page 14.
Yeah.
I worked at Brookhouse many years ago. I don't remember any incidents where staff used derogatory language or racist remarks. No one ever made racist comments in front of me. I didn't witness this. You say there is some language in the Panorama programme that the inquiry may deem to be derogatory. To me, many of the comments are distasteful or silly. But staff are exposed to many difficult situations over and over, and when you become desensitised, silly comments are made.
Yeah.
Now, first of all, what does Jan Pashali mean by distasteful?
Okay, I'll take that further. Obviously, swear words, bad language, extremely bad language. Sorry, 1 second. But I genuinely mean this. I never witnessed any racist comments.
No, but what about
Bad language, bad language. And I've used bad language. I did use bad language myself. It was commonplace. Detainees swore at us. We swore at them.
Yeah.
It was the norm.
So not just the use of bad language, but did you witness, or were you yourself guilty of using abusive language?
What do you mean by
directed-
abusive language, though? Because bad language was a common thing. So, did I tell a detainee to F off? Yes.
Yeah. No, that's
did-
one example, but that's not the example I'm asking you about. Did you actually call any detainees' names?
I can't remember. You'd have to give me an example. I don't know.
No? Or did you witness other people referring to them in any derogatory way? I mean, we could all think of names that one could use. The C word.
Yes.
Yes, so they would use that word?
Yes, it was
Yeah.
used.
And did you?
Yes, I'm pretty sure I did.
Yeah. And was that normalised within the environment of Brookhouse?
Yes, it was.
And I'm sure you'll say it was a two-way street,
Well, of course it was.
not the one-way street that Mr. Donnelly was speaking about yesterday.
No.
Racist language, though, you told us earlier, and you just said you don't recall.
I don't recall anyone
No.
using racist language towards me or in front of me.
No. And would you regard part of the reason for that, if not, maybe you will say all of the reason, desensitisation? You talk about being desensitised.
It was normal.
Yeah. Normal for that establishment.
Yes.
And do you think that is because of the environment in which you worked? In other words, was there people have referred to a toxic culture in Brookhouse, and people refer to the desensitisation of people who work there. In other words, if you're in that kind of environment, the ordinary norms and values go out the window and people behave differently. Do you think that that's true of yourself and others at Brookhouse at the time?
In relation to the bad language, the extremely bad language, yes, as I said to you, it was normal.
Mm.
It wouldn't be shocking for a detainee to come into the office and swear, and we would swear back. But it wasn't always, it was just normal. It was the detainees took it as normal, we took it as normal.
Yeah.
It was just normal.
And you say at 115, I don't believe the language used by staff impacted on the care of individuals detained at Brookhouse.
No, because we still did our jobs.
And what about other kinds of derogatory, offensive or insensitive language, homophobic, misogynistic type of language?
I don't recall hearing homophobic.
Or misogynistic?
You'd have to explain to me what that means.
Well, about women
No.
being insensitive to or offensive to, of and about women.
Nothing that sticks out in my mind, no.
What about physical abuse? I think you may have said a thing or two about it earlier, but let's be clear, in all the time that you were there, forget yourself for the moment, did you see any of your colleagues engaged in any physical abuse of any of the detainees? Any striking, anything outside? I'm not talking about laying hands on.
I witnessed strike. Of course, I witnessed striking, but all within the realms of restraints or during a restraint. I never witnessed an officer walk up to a detained person and just hit them for no reason.
But are you talking about somebody who went over the top during a restraint, or are you talking about justifiable, necessary, and non-excessive force during a use of force intervention?
I witnessed justifiable uses of force, obviously.
Yeah.
I never witnessed anyone walking up to a detained person and just laying into them.
So nothing gratuitous.
I never witnessed anyone laying into anybody.
Right. So what we should take from your evidence, Mr. Pashali, is that the only time, and if I've got this wrong and misunderstood you, you must tell me that I have, but the only time that you witnessed any physicality, let's say, between staff and detainees was during use of force interventions.
Use of force type incidents, yes.
And nothing outside that particular kind of situation.
No. I would just like to say again, which I did say earlier, if it was commonplace and rife, that type of behaviour, Callum Tully would have untold footage of it, would he not? None of us knew that we were being undercover recorded. So if that was commonplace, you'd be inundated with footage of that, would you not?
Well, against that, let's look at the 25th of April, Mr. Pashali. Let's begin, if we may, please, with what Callum Tully had to say and look at his account. Forgive me, I think what we'll do is we'll look at your account, actually, to begin with. Let's look at paragraph 10. Forgive me, not paragraph 10. Tab 10 for you, Chair. And if we can put up on screen SXP 000127. Now, if we look at the top, Mr. Pashali, you'll remember this is an interview you had with the PSU on the 14th of September with Julie Galvin, and it runs for a few pages, about 13 pages, so we're not going to look at all of it. What we will do is, and I'm saving time, you've seen the footage, and we've all seen the footage, but I'm going to play aspects of it later. But just to save some time, I want to look at what you had to say about it. And so this is the 14th of September. And if we go to the second page, towards the top, do you see the long answer by you when Julie Galvin asks, what's your response to allegations made in Panorama? And you say, the programme only shows a very small part of what happened. You haven't heard my side of the story, and no one has asked me what I was doing. Everyone has only seen what the narrator said I was doing. The detainee tried to hurt himself and take his life quite a few times that day. On this particular occasion, I believed wholeheartedly that he was attempting to swallow something which could potentially kill him or harm him. That wasn't shown on the TV at all. The reason my hands were in the position they were was because I didn't want him to swallow. I didn't want to put my fingers in his mouth as they could get bitten off. I did what I thought was best at the time to stop him swallowing what was in his mouth that could kill him or harm him. And you continue, from what was on TV and my experience in custodial care, I went in, it's not shown, but my recollection was there was a fight going on between an officer and the detainee, so we took him to the ground. I know the words I used at the beginning were shocking to anyone watching, but my reason for being that way was to gain control. I wanted to shock him into compliance, to stop his aggressive behaviour and bring him down, which in my opinion is what happened. He had something in his mouth, which was why he was in the position he was in. We're taught that you have their head between your legs and brace one hand on the forehead and another on the chin. My hands weren't on his forehead or below his chin because I didn't want him to swallow the article, which I think was a phone battery. But I wasn't sure at the time if it was razor blades, as he'd done this quite a few times that day. I believe I did stop him from swallowing it, and I believe I saved his life. I know the reporter was saying I was strangling him to death. But if I was doing that, the guy wouldn't have been able to scream and shout as he was doing. I remained quite calm, in my opinion, after the initial verbal commands, shock tactics. I wanted him to freeze, to stop moving, so we could calm the situation down. After that, I'm completely calm.
I can't see the rest, sorry.
What?
I can't see the rest. It stopped on my
Oh,
screen.
well, sorry, if Zainab would just scroll it up, please.
Thank you.
I remained quite calm, in my opinion, after the initial verbal commands, shock tactics. I wanted him to freeze, to stop moving, so we could calm the situation down. After that, I'm completely calm. At one point, my hand is resting on my thigh. How am I throttling him if it's resting on my thigh? What you don't see is the undercover reporter saying, "Yan, yan, yan." He overreacted, in my opinion. He was behaving weird. I said to him, "Callum, will you calm down? Calm down, everything is under control." That's why my hand came away as I was gesturing to Callum to calm down, waving my hand, and it went to my thigh. But I think they have cut it out, so you don't see anything which shows I'm composed and in control of the situation. My justification for my hands being where they were is that I thought it was necessary at the time and justified, as I didn't want him to swallow what's in his mouth. If I hadn't done that, and this guy had, and this is how it read, does with me sitting on top of him, what position would I be in, because I didn't do anything to try and help? And then she asks you, so prior to the filming, you have to go in and said things to shock him. I didn't say that prior to the filming, you say. You don't have to do anything. The idea is to shock him to not carry on with the behaviour he was doing at the time. If you watch the footage, he stops. The shocking words I said were, "Don't move, you fucking piece of shit." If you hear the sounds only, I said, "Don't move, you fucking piece of shit. I don't want to put you to sleep." But I said, "I'm going to put you to sleep." I know the words sound terrible, but it achieved what I wanted it to achieve, and he stopped. And she asks, when you said that, was he not lying on his back? And you said he was. but those words had just taken him down, and it's important that you see that. And so she asks you, were those words said to shock him and get his compliance? And then your hands are in the position they are to stop him swallowing, and you answer, swallowing, I didn't stop him breathing. The reporter said my hands were digging into his throat. They were not. They were supporting his neck. My arms weren't pumping. If you are throttling someone, your arms pump or move. Mine was still. How is that throttling him? Why did the detainee not make a complaint? When I released him and slowly left the room, at no point did he complain or say, why did you do that, or swear at me? And then you add, I sat down with the detainee the same day after he calmed down. I went to chat with him. I believe there is footage on the G4S CCTV landing cameras which will show the detainee shaking my hand as we spoke. And I explained it wasn't right he tried to kill himself on more than one occasion, and if he wanted help with his immigration issues, we would be happy to help. And why not deal with those issues instead of all this other stuff? He thanked me for it. So that is, Mr. Pashali, the guts of what you said to the PSU. And if we look, and again, I don't invite for it to go up on screen, in your second witness statement, at paragraph 5, you begin to deal with the incident on the 25th of April. You rely effectively on that same account for your evidence, the inquiry. Do you agree? Because that's the core of your account, and
That is basically the core of my account, yes.
yeah, and you haven't moved over much from it in all of the accounts that you have given. And do you say, Mr. Pashali, that that was an honest and truthful account of what happened?
That's what happened. That is
Is
what
that
happened.
an honest and truthful account of what happened, is my question.
Yes, that is what happened.
Is it an honest and truthful account?
I don't
It's a
understand. That is,
different question. You say that's what happened. I'm asking you if your account to the PSU was honest and truthful.
yes, it was,
Right.
and that's what happened.
So we understand your position that everything we see you do was designed to stop him swallowing a battery.
I believed that there was definitely a battery or something in his mouth.
It was to stop him swallowing what was in his mouth or what you believed was in his mouth. It was to gain control.
Yes,
And you wanted to shock him into compliance,
yes,
which was why you used the words as well.
yes.
Right. What did you mean by to bring him down? Do you remember the words I just read out?
Yes, I remember the words you
What
just
does
read
that
out.
mean, bring
So
him down?
if you're dealing with a situation where someone is level 10, you need to go in at level 11. You need to go in at a higher level in order to gain compliance and then bring that down. He's level 10, I come in at level 6, 7, 4, 5. It's not going to work. And we are taught that effectively. Not exactly how I've just described it, but that is something that you are
Yeah.
taught. And the idea is to gain compliance as quickly as possible, which I believe I did.
Right, and likewise, you were saying that you were taught to have the head between the legs and brace one hand on the forehead
Correct,
and another on the chin.
correct,
Which is exactly what you didn't do.
correct.
Yeah.
Because
Because,
there is no procedure, which I've said in my statement, and I've asked your expert to come back on that. No one's come back to me. But at the time, and I'm pretty sure now, there is no procedure for what to do when someone is choking on something. There isn't a written technique like you do this, this, and this.
yeah.
You know, a step-by-step guide on what to do. There isn't one.
Yeah.
You do what you believe is best at the time.
There's only one problem, Mr. Pashali. He wasn't choking on anything, was he? He wasn't choking on a battery.
Yes, he was choking on something.
So you think he was choking?
I'm pretty sure he was choking on something.
Pretty
I
sure.
believe he was choking on something.
And so the words
I
you
was-
used,
Yeah.
the words you used as you said to the PSU in September were, don't move, you fucking piece of shit. I don't want to put you to sleep. Those were the words, were they?
I wasn't sure at the time, and I'm still not sure, to be honest with you, to this day, whether I said, I don't want you to put you to fucking sleep, or I will put you to fucking sleep, or I'm going to put you to fucking sleep. I can't remember, or I'm not even sure to this day what I said. Obviously, it was roughly along those lines. Do I regret saying that? Of course I do. But I said it. It was in order to gain compliance.
Well, we'll see exactly what you did say, Mr. Bashali, but you know full well it wasn't don't move, and it wasn't I don't want to put you to sleep.
Why are you
because-
trying to put words in my mouth? I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you can't say I don't. You know full well.
Mr.
I don't know
Bashali,
full well. I wasn't sure.
I'm going to give you the courtesy of listening to you.
Okay.
If you will give me the courtesy of listening to my question, then you can say what you want.
Okay.
All right? Then we'll understand each other and get along a lot better. You knew full well, is my suggestion to you,
Thank you.
that the words don't move, you fucking piece of shit, and the words I don't want to put you to sleep were not said. You completely turned the whole thing on its head.
No, I
when you
haven't
spoke to
completely
the
turned.
PSU.
Sorry. I'll let you finish. I'm sorry.
Didn't you? You turned the whole thing on its head. Didn't you?
Do you want me to answer that?
Yes, I do.
Yes. No, I did not.
Right.
Because there's not a great difference between those two lines anyway.
Do you not think so?
Not really. Either way, it's bad, and I'm accepting that. But I wasn't sure at the time what I actually said.
You don't think there's a difference between don't move, you fucking piece of shit, I don't want to put you to sleep, and you fucking piece of shit, I am going to put you to sleep. You don't see a difference between those two ideas.
Okay, obviously there's a difference.
Yeah,
But
there
in my
is.
mind, they're both equally as bad.
Yeah.
So I'm not denying that was what was said. I simply wasn't sure what was said exactly at the time.
Well, one idea is I don't want to have to do this to you, and the other is this is exactly what I'm doing to you.
Well, of course I didn't want to do anything to him.
No. Let's have a look at what you said, then, please, to the police. Chair, for you, it's tab 22. You'll remember you were interviewed at CPS 00019. Remember, Mr. Bashali, you were interviewed by the police the following year on the 12th of February 2018 by the police over the course of just over an hour. Do you remember that?
Correct.
In the presence of a solicitor,
Correct.
under caution. Yeah?
Was I? I'm not sure about that.
Well, it says here at the top. You
Okay.
see in bold.
Yeah, okay.
You were told of your rights. You were cautions. The caution was administered to you. It was explained, and you understood it.
Yeah,
And if you hadn't, you could rest assured your solicitor would have explained it to you.
okay.
Now, there are a lot of pages to this interview. As I say, it took place over the course of an hour.
Sorry, could I just say something as well? Because obviously you pointed out that I was cautioned, which is correct. I accept that. But it also does say here, voluntarily attended the interview.
Yeah, I'm not. That's
Okay.
a different
No,
proposition.
well, I
You
just
weren't
wanted to
under
make that
arrest,
clear.
Nobody's saying you were under arrest, Mr. Bashali.
Thank you.
I simply said that you were under caution.
Yeah.
And if we go, please, to page 6. And we take it from the bottom. So he was standing up, and in all honesty, it looked like a scuffle with him and the staff, like a bit of a wrestling match. So I came in and assisted in taking him to the floor to gain control. We'll just let the page to load at the top, thank you. And to gain compliance, which is what we did. And I believed that until I came in, it wasn't under control. And when I came in, it became under control. And to get on to the language that I used, I mean, firstly, I'd like to say I don't want the subtitles. It probably should be want. The subtitles or I don't know perhaps what the subtitles say there. I don't believe I said that. So let's be clear. Had you seen the footage before this interview had taken place?
I believe I saw the programme.
But the police hadn't shown you
No,
the footage again
so-
or any part of it?
No, and they were going to.
Right.
And I asked if it was possible to have no subtitles to
Right.
try and determine exactly what was.
So that we're clear, by the time this interview was taking place, Mr. Pashali, in February 2018, the only time you'd seen the relevant footage had been during the course of the live broadcast?
The programme. Yes.
It says on the subtitles that I say, "Don't move, you fucking piece of shit, or I'll put you to fucking sleep." I believe I said, "Don't move, you fucking piece of shit. I don't want to put you to sleep," is what I think I said. So you see in February of 2018, you're continuing the same account, it's the same narrative as you gave to the PSU, and then further down the page, the solicitor intervenes at on the tape counter 2122. You can see that footage is cut because 1 minute he's got his hands on his neck, and the next one his hands is on his leg. And DP is you. That's how something panned out. I take that on board, you say. Getting back to what I said, I believe I did say, "I'll put you to fucking sleep." And the officer says, "Yeah." I think that's pretty clear. Yeah, I didn't think I said that. The reason I said that is to gain compliance. I've done this job for a very long time. It's how we were taught. You go in with loud, strong commands. Is that what you were taught? Strong, what, shouting at the detained person during use of force?
To give a loud, strong command. Obviously, we weren't taught to swear at people, no.
No, you weren't taught to say, "You fucking piece of
No,
shit,"
we
presumably.
weren't. No, we weren't.
No. Granted, you know, hindsight and looking back, swearing, all the rest of it is, that's not ideal. And I wish I didn't do it, but my intentions were not to hurt this kid. They weren't. I believe the footage shows that I'm not hitting him. You've got to remember, just taking a while to load. You've got to remember I didn't know this was being recorded, so this is me working naturally in my environment. Now, if we go then on to page 15, because I just want to understand something that you were saying here, is whether or not you were agreeing or disagreeing with what the words actually were. On page 15, you'll see about 6 entries down, the officer with the badge number CT592, the shoulder number. You then lead forward in the clip, but you say some words, yeah. You agree, do you agree that you say that? Yes, and then talks about putting him to sleep is what you say, yes. We've watched that a couple of times. This is you saying that. We've watched that a couple of times. And you've now said, by the look of it, I did say it. Now, first of all, what do you mean, or what did you mean by saying you'd watched it a couple of times? What did you watch a couple
I'd
of
asked
times?
the police officer, I think it was a police officer or a higher rank, I'm not sure, to play it for me a few times because I wasn't sure.
In interview?
Yes.
So we should understand here, although it's not shown or made clear during the course of this record of interview, that you were shown what? The clip of the words that you uttered?
Yes.
Or the whole?
No, just the clip.
Just that part of it?
Just that, yeah, just that part of it, because I wasn't sure
Yeah.
about what was said.
Yeah. And so you say, we've watched that a couple of times, and you've now said, by the look of it, I did say it. And the officer says, yes, you're in agreement with that. And you say, I am in agreement with that. What were you agreeing to? What were you agreeing to? Because it's not made clear what you were agreeing to here.
The words that were used.
And what were the words that were used, Mr.
That
Bashali?
I'll put you to fucking sleep.
Yeah. So none of this, don't move.
I wasn't sure. Is that how many more times do you want me to say I wasn't sure? Hence, I asked the guy to play it a few times so that I could be sure.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure.
So we should understand, Mr. Bashali, that when the PSU interviewed you
Yes.
the year before, that when you said with, it looks like certainty, that you had said, don't move, I don't want to put you to sleep, it was only now that it became clear to you that you had actually said the complete opposite.
Because I had the opportunity to review the footage a number of times.
I see.
I
Not
wasn't
that-
sure.
It wasn't that you were being untruthful with the PSU.
No, it was not.
No. And so you're asked by the officer, well, why did you say it? And you say, if you recall, in the positions that we described, and nothing's really happening, and then he starts to writhe and he starts to resist, which is what sort of made me jump forward, because his chest kind of comes up off the floor a little bit. I'm not sure how clear that is, but from the footage you've shown me, it's clear to me that his body starts to writhe and wriggle. So I said it, as I said at the beginning, to try and gain compliance, for want of a better word, to sort of shock him and to bring him back down. It worked, because I'm not sure of the sequence of events on this clip are in order, but after that you see my hand is on my thigh, my left thigh, and if I was trying to throttle this guy and he believed I was trying to throttle him, how would everything be so calm that I can take one, I'll have to go to the next page. One hand away and put it there. If you were trying to throttle me and you took your hand away from my neck, first opportunity I'd got, I'd try and get out of that position. So, apart from the acceptance by you that the words that you told the PSU in the year before, and the words that you started telling the police about, were what you had remembered saying, in fact, were not the words that you actually said, your account is much the same. It was all about preventing him swallowing a battery that you believed he had in his mouth, strong commands, and to gain compliance and control. So that's really the core of what you were doing and why you were doing it.
I'd agree with that. That's the core, yes.
Yeah. I mean, if he was wriggling and writhing around, then one could understand, perhaps, if you were to shout a strong command, don't move. But by the time we reach this position in the interview, you have agreed and conceded that you didn't say don't move at all. So why was it you had to do what you were doing? What was the point of it? How are you going to stop him swallowing a battery?
Sorry, I don't understand what you're saying. What was the
How are
point
you
of
going to
what?
stop him swallowing a battery by doing what you were doing?
I was bracing his neck so that he couldn't swallow.
He was on his back.
Yes.
Well, if you're on your back and you have something in your throat,
Yeah.
that's not an ideal position for someone to be in, is it? If he's got a battery in his throat.
I still don't understand what you're saying. Are you trying to say that if someone's on their back, they can't swallow? Or they can swallow?
I'm saying on the contrary, that they can. It's the
Yes,
worst
that's why I was bracing his neck. But that when we took him down, that's how we ended up on the floor.
Look, why don't you put him in the recovery position? To stop him from swallowing it,
because-
or at least put him on his front.
Because I was bracing his neck, and I wasn't the only officer in the room. Two other officers had control of his arms.
Yeah.
A third officer or a fourth officer had control of his legs.
Yeah.
And I was bracing his neck.
So you don't think that in saying to the PSU and originally to the police that the words you were using were don't move and then changing them, you don't think the words you originally uttered were designed to protect you, Mr. Pashali?
How would they protect me?
Well, because if you were telling the PSU and then the police that all I was saying was don't move, you were trying to make things better for yourself, weren't you?
No.
You don't think so?
No, not at all. I wasn't sure, which I've told you that already. I wasn't sure, and I hadn't seen enough of the footage.
So what was the real reason, and we're going to look at it in a while, probably after lunch, but what was the real reason for leaning over him and whispering, because we see, and you'll remember, you actually physically leaned down with your torso.
I fell forward.
What?
I fell forward.
You fell.
I fell forward.
You fell forward. Why did you fall forward?
Well, you just read it out.
What did I read out?
We'll go back a couple of pages and we'll read it again.
What do you want to read?
You just read out something along the lines of that where he started to wriggle and writhe.
Yeah.
I fell forward.
Well, let's go back to page 15. You said at the bottom, nothing's really happening, and then he starts to writhe and he starts to resist, which is what sort of made me jump forward, because his chest kind of comes up off the floor a little bit. So when we see the footage, what we're going to see is him wriggling and writhing, and the effect of that is you jump forward.
I didn't jump forward, I fell forward.
You fell forward. Well, you just used the word jump. That's
Yeah,
your word,
sorry.
not my word.
But basically what I'm trying to say to you here is that because of his movements,
Yeah,
I lost my position.
right. And so, as it happens, as you lost your position and you found yourself jumping forward, you took the opportunity to whisper, "You fucking piece of shit, because I'm going to put you to fucking sleep."
I gave him that command, yes.
That was a command, was it?
It was a command.
"You fucking piece of shit."
That's correct.
Because I'm going to put you to fucking... What kind of command is that, Mr. Bashali?
In order to gain compliance.
But it wasn't a strong command because you
Well,
whispered.
the words were strong,
Well,
not
what-
not the correct words or not the words that I would use
Right.
again, but it was a command
Yeah.
to shock him into gaining compliance.
Well, what kind of command is that? It doesn't say don't do something. It doesn't even say do something.
Well, would it shock you? It's a shocking word, isn't it? It's a shocking sentence. That's the
Charlie,
idea of it. It's a
what,
shock.
what it actually is you telling him what you're about to do to him. It's a threat,
No,
isn't
it's
it?
not.
It's a threat.
No, it's not.
What else do the words "you fucking piece of shit because I'm going to put you to fucking sleep" mean? What
Is
does
that
it
really
mean?
clear in your mind that it was a threat?
What is fucking put you to sleep? What does that mean?
No, I want to ask you a question. Am I allowed to ask a question?
No, you're not.
I'm not allowed to
actually.
ask you a question.
No, you are not.
I'm not allowed to ask you a question.
No. No, you're not. I'm not here giving evidence. You are. Now, what do the words
Okay. Well,
"I'm
no,
going
I
to
haven't
put
finished.
you to fucking
Sorry.
sleep," Mr. Pashani,
Well, the
mean?
words are obviously that I used them to gain compliance, which I've said many times this morning. If you want to break them down, obviously it does mean that I'll put you to sleep. But I didn't put him to sleep. I didn't put him to sleep.
No.
And my intention wasn't to put him to sleep. And I don't like what you're trying to imply to the inquiry, because why did the police not charge me or arrest me for doing what you're suggesting that I did?
What
Why did the
words-
CPS not prosecute me? There's a document, I don't know the details, I'm sure you do, a lengthy document from the CPS.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about. You're talking about the victim's right to review document, Mr. Pashani, aren't you?
Yeah, why are you dismissing that like it's nothing?
It's got nothing to do with anything.
No,
Mr.
but it
Pashani.
doesn't say that I'm guilty of what you
No.
are trying to say.
I am not even suggesting you're guilty of anything. I'm asking you a much simpler question.
Okay.
And the simpler question is, when you, because you must have intended to use the words because they fell out of your mouth, when you use the words, "I'm going to put you to fucking sleep," what did you mean by it?
Right, you've just said you must have meant these words because they fell out of your mouth. Again, you're insinuating that I wanted to put him to sleep. I've told you quite a few times, my intention was not to put him to sleep. It was to gain compliance, which I did.
What did the words mean, Mr.? Are you going to answer the question? What did
I am
those
answering the
words-
question.
No, you haven't.
I'm sorry, but I don't
You
understand.
have not answered the
The words
question.
meant
What do the
I was
words
trying
mean?
to gain compliance.
Is that what it means? So, when all is said
I
and done,
used
Mr.
those words to
Bashali,
try and gain... I don't know how else you want me to put it.
When all is said and done, Mr. Bashali, and you have left this hearing room sometime, hopefully later today, the chair is expected to take from you that the words "I'm going to put you to fucking sleep" meant no more than a strong command.
They meant no
To
more
gain compliance.
to gain compliance.
Okay? Fine. So it wasn't a threat.
No, it was not a threat.
It wasn't a window into your intention of what you
No.
would like to do to him. No.
No. Can I just add one other thing? Again, I'd like to say I'm being undercover recorded, right? So I don't know that that camera's switched on and recording me. If my intentions were in any way, shape or form what you're trying to suggest they were, why did I not abuse him, punch him, kick him, slap him, be racial towards him and all the rest of it? Because that was not my intention.
Why did you whisper the words rather than shout them?
I was right in his face, so I just said them. I wanted him to hear it.
Why did you not shout the words so that all of your colleagues around you could hear what you were
My
saying?
colleagues heard what I said.
Did they?
Yes,
All of them?
I believe so.
Were you a bit frustrated by him?
Of course I was frustrated by him,
Why?
because he had attempted to harm himself many times that day, and I had sat down with him previous to this incident, and I really thought we'd got somewhere. So for him to do the same again, yes, it frustrated me.
When did you see him previously that day?
I can't remember. I was on the wing. I think I was on the wing all day.
Because, of course, you know that he had tied a ligature around his neck the day before.
He done it a lot.
But he'd done it the day before.
I can't remember if he done it the day before.
The 24th of April, at around 3:15 in the afternoon, when a ligature was removed from his neck, and Nathan Ring was there present. And you turned up as well, in fact. We have some video of it, but I'm not going to show it to you unless you deny that you were present.
I
But
don't, if you say I was there, I was there.
No, but you knew that this was a vulnerable man, didn't you?
I knew that he'd committed acts of self-harm and suicide. It was me
Yeah.
that cut the ligature off his neck in that incident.
In which incident?
In this one that you're referring, not the Nathan Ring one, this particular one, it was me that cut the ligature off of his neck.
On the
that he had-
25th of April?
Yes.
Wasn't it Steve Loughton?
No.
It was you.
He had a ligature around his neck when we
Yeah.
took him to the ground, and I reached over and took the fish knife out of Charlie Francis's belt and cut the ligature off of his neck.
Forgive me. So we're not talking about an earlier incident. You're talking about in this actual incident, it was you that cut the ligature from his...
I cut a ligature off of his neck. Now, this is what I was going to come on to later. I don't understand if these incidents that you're showing, what days they are, if they've been mixed or whatever, because it doesn't play the way I remember it.
No. We don't see you cutting a ligature from his neck, do we? In the footage of the 25th of April. Do we?
It was me that cut the ligature off.
Do you agree? We don't see
I can't
it.
remember. I haven't seen it. I'm sure you're going to show it later.
Coming back to your frustrations, while we still have this police interview open, can we have a look at page 4? There's a long answer there, but about halfway down, can you make out the words doors shut, which is the obvious place to focus?
Yes.
They sit on one side of the door looking through the glass panel and he's on the other. And this is what I want to ask you about. So as the day's going on, I'm getting annoyed because at the back of my mind I'm thinking, where's he getting the stuff from?
Yes.
But we'll put that to one side for now. So he had razor blades, which I took off him, ligatures, which I took off him, lighter, which I took off him because he tried to set himself on fire. But he was totally unsuccessful with that. Phone we took off him. And I think on this particular situation, even a phone battery which we took off him, sorry, what was the question? Now, razor blades, lighters, when did all of that happen?
It
You're
was
not
during-
talking about that day, are you?
Yes, I am talking.
You're talking about that day?
I believe so.
You believe so?
I searched. Or I can't be sure, but I know that I searched that room. When he went into those conditions, he wasn't allowed to have anything because he kept trying to self-harm and commit acts of suicide. So I think it's Rule 40, but I'm not 100%. He was under those conditions. I thoroughly searched that room and made sure there was nothing in that room. So I couldn't understand how he was getting all these items.
We're not talking necessarily then, Mr. Pashali, about the 25th. It could have been before the 25th. Is
I
that
don't know
what
when he
you're telling
came in. When did he come into Ewing on those conditions?
us? Well, if I'm right, it was the 24th,
Okay.
the day before. What about the phone battery we took off him? When was that? When did you take a phone battery
I
off
can't
him?
remember when it was.
That day? Because there's no other evidence that he had a phone battery other than on the 25th. So when do you think, according to what you said here, even a phone battery which we took off him, When did you take a phone battery off him?
I'm not sure, but if we assume that I searched the room on the 24th and took all those items off of him, it still doesn't explain how he got the stuff back the following day, because he was under those conditions where he shouldn't have been having anything. Even if he wanted to have a shower, his shower gel would be outside of his door and we would give it to him when he goes for a shower.
And then let's move on before we break to one or two other references. Top of page 6. Right at the top, this is what I was saying. I was getting annoyed because every time we took things away, he would get more of them. And this is what I couldn't understand. And so you say the same kind of thing. And then finally, in this interview, please, top of page 17. But bear in mind, we've taken things, say like the razor blade and the phone, we've taken things away from him. But then he would have them again. And I remember being upset and annoyed about that. So it wasn't as if we would have taken it and given another one. And that was kind of going on throughout the day. Now, this interview is all about what you did to this detainee in the evening of the 25th of April. And here you are describing annoyance and upset about the fact, as you would have it, that all of these things had been taken from him, and yet somehow he had items available to him which allowed him to self-harm. Do you think that by the time you did as you did on the 25th of April that you were annoyed and upset, and indeed so annoyed and upset that you behaved in the way that we see?
I've already told you that I was upset and that I was annoyed that he had the article, so I'm not disputing that.
No.
What did I behave in the way that I did because I was angry and annoyed with him? No. If I was angry and annoyed with him, why didn't I just give him a slap? If I'm annoyed and angry with him because he's upset me, why didn't I just give him a dig? Why didn't I just do something like that?
Yeah.
I didn't. So that isn't the reason why I took the actions that I took.
No, but what you did do was threaten, I suggest, to put him to fucking sleep.
Yes, to gain compliance.
Yeah.
We can say this all day long, to gain compliance.
But we're not going to, so don't worry, Mr. Bashali. Chair, it's just gone 1. And so can I suggest that's a good time, unless you have any questions you want to ask
No,
at this
I don't.
juncture.
Let's break for lunch now,
Break
shall
for
we?
lunch till 2 o'clock. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bashali.
All rise.